panel, we defend a world where every human being has access to a clear, fixed, and changeable piece of information: when they die and how they die. The death is inevitable and cannot be altered. What that means is, even if you know this information, you cannot try to avoid it, because that would be a pursuit in futility. We frame this as a world of certainty from Gov and a world of uncertainty from Op. Let's now get into my clarifications. These are very, very important, so please pay attention. There are 7 in total, so I'll do my best to explain this as simply and as slowly as possible so we all get it. 1, this is not about changing the cause of death, because knowing doesn't allow you to prevent it. 2, it is not about mass panic or collapse, because people have always adapted to new information. New things have always sprung up and scared us. Vaccines scared us because we thought they were going to give us the disease. The internet scared us because we thought that the computers would rise up and kill us or something of that sort. What that meant was that people always adapt to more information as and when they come to us. Thirdly, it is not about timeline changes or some sci-fi case that closing up would come and run, because they run very weird things. Because you can't die earlier or later because you know. This information doesn't create a paradox in the space-time continuum or some other Star Trek fuckery like that. But fourthly, opposition equally can't claim that people will become reckless. Why? Because recklessness is believing that one might die tomorrow. In our world, you know whether or not you are going to be dying tomorrow. What that means is that you can prioritize and you can take fewer risks. 5th point, quiet. They also can't say that people will obsess over death or every possibility of death. The only reason that happens in their world is because people don't know when they are going to die. In our world, they are probably going to know. They have more time to acclimatize to that piece of information. But Sith, I'm not done. But Sith, the government would have access to this information. I think this is fairly obvious. I don't think there's a lot of pushback on this. But 7thly, the information is democratized, not going to be exclusive to some group of minorities, some very rich people or privileged people in that particular regard. What do you want? Okay, no problem. On to our first case. Do I have any POIs with regards to my frame? Don't come and challenge the frame and say I was unfair. I'm giving a chance to challenge it now. No problem. On our first case on long-term planning, note the scope of this case is fairly small. It exists on an individual level. I'm flagging that first of all. Don't worry. We'll broaden the scope later on. Note, knowing when you die creates a capacity to plan. For example, I know that I'm going to have class with Justice Asiedu tomorrow, so I know that I have to read those cases. If I don't read those cases, it's going to call me and embarrass me in front of my crush. What that means is that in their world, that is, in status quo, where people don't know, a number of different things can happen. 1, people can continue to work meaningless jobs because they think that, oh, I can switch up later on in life. But 2, they fail to take risks because, what if I regret it forever? I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. But thirdly, because of all of the decisions that they take, because of their lack of capacity, they continuously live in deep regret. And other situations like them making worthless future promises because, oh, I will do this tomorrow, or I will do this when I retire. The issue is you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, and you don't know when you're going to retire. What that means is that it's a worthless promise. What then are the impacts? You can't align your life goals properly. So you choose to do law, and you know that law is a 6-year course. You don't know that you are going to die in your 4th year, so you are going to do LLB. You are wasting your time. In our world, you don't do those things. Secondly, you avoid overworking and underliving, and you prioritize the things that are more important to you because you know that you are working on a fixed timeline that you are aware of, and that equally means you can allocate resources more efficiently in that particular regard. Resources can be plentiful: your relationships, time, money, etc., etc. How then is our world better on a more broader scope, that is on the entire society, on 3 levels? Let's start with on a more smaller scope, that is with regards to better individual decision making and why that is better for society. In status quo, people decide because of the fear of unknown. That is, their decision-making calculus is actively acted upon by the fact that they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, or they don't know what is going to happen. So people preemptively act. So for example, they will overwork or underlive because they know that, oh, if I continue to work more and gather all of this money, I can reap my rewards later on in life, even if they just die tomorrow. But secondly, they are hoarding resources or becoming more protected with all of the things that they have because of the fear of unknown. Comparatively, in our world where people have this information and they have this access to that information, they have the capacity to be rational. Note, this is not me saying that the people in their world are stupid or dumb. They cannot be fully rational because they don't have the full scope of that information. They just don't know. In our world, they can be rational because they do know. What that means is that, one, they know their time horizon, so they can simply plan better. The impacts then are that on a more individual level, the workforce is more productive. So they don't deal with things like anxiety. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I die tomorrow, if I die on this trip, if I die because my wife decides to stab me tomorrow, whatever the fuck that is going to happen. That's on the individual level. Let's then move on to how we create better families in our world. Death unpredictability destroys family. What is the mech for this? On a number of different levels. One, a parent can suddenly die and leave 3 kids without any plan. 2, Amma and Kofi, who are married, are fighting and are worrying about dumb things because they think that, oh, I can solve this tomorrow. But Amma doesn't know that Kofi is going to die on his way to work tomorrow morning, and they never get the opportunity to talk. They never get that closure. The issue then is solved in our world because comparative one, we know, so we can prioritize all of those things in that particular regard. But secondly, we don't make decisions based on the illusion of tomorrow, and we also don't live the people that are dependent upon us without any safety net, without any help, without any aid. Thirdly, on why the society is better in our world is simply because better governance. How and why? Governments are plagued by human resource crises constantly. How? One, there's a mass death at one time affecting population turnover. Someone just going to go and shoot up a school somewhere. Quiet, this time up. Secondly, unnecessary surgeries. This person is sick. We don't know what is going to happen to them, but then we are doing all research. Note in our world, we know how they are going to die. So we know that that malaria that they have is not going to kill them. But thirdly, companies can have predictable succession plans in our world, so the CEO doesn't die mid-project. But equally, the president or the ministers don't just up and die. We have the ability to plan. We have that capacity to be rational. We have that information. Proudly, Prime Minister.
Panel, I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's rare when opening government comes and argues opening opposition's case. Because if your idea is that the idea of knowing when to maximize your time is based on whether or not you know when you will die, then we win. Because we think a world of uncertainty, a world where you're not sure whether the day you die is tomorrow or the day you die is next week, is a world that tells you to do what it is you love, what it is you want to do, and trying to accomplish as most as you can every single day. It's a world where you cherish every single day of your life because you don't know if it's going to be your last in and of itself. And finally, we think that world of uncertainty is what breeds the hope that allows you to adapt to information inherently in society. When you know the certainty that you are going to die, that all your efforts will not yield, etc., you are less likely to be able to adapt to information, because if the information is bad, you think that things will get better only because you think that there can be hope, because it hasn't happened yet and you survived things in the past. Why can't you survive this now? What then are the cases we bring today in today's debate? 1, we think we have a conversation of the extreme mental burden that actually befalls people in a world where you know where you're going to die. For this case, you need to analyze driven people and average people to understand our impact that is unique from theirs. First of all, what do I want to say? Uncertainty is what makes you believe that positive things can happen. That is to say that as I am 20 years old now, Joel, I believe I can have another 20 years to live, because in the past 20 years, I've had struggles. My mother died. My father lost his job and couldn't provide for us. I was once in a car accident that actually almost left me paralyzed, but I've survived all these things. Because I have survived these things, I'm better able to see the world in a positive future and believe that if I can survive those things, things are less likely to be able to completely take me down. I just need to work harder enough. But secondly, adaptation to information and hope that exists in status quo exists And the reason why therapists, psychologists are able to help people with mental health burden is because they can convince them of these narratives. Because it is hard to believe your therapist telling you that things can get better if you work on yourself when you know that in 2 months' time you're probably going to die. And the impact of this is true. Archimedes, you know this. People with terminal conditions are the people who suffer the most mental health burden issues and most likely to do things like commit suicide. They say that we are not changing when you die, so we admit not more people will be committing suicide anyway. But making the last days of their life significantly worse is very problematic when they are the most susceptible to having those particular problems and traumas in and of itself. I'll take you people later. But I think in a world where we consistently have all these tragedies, etc., it's better to have this level of speculation to drive you to want to do better. But what then is the analysis of the driven person versus the average person I wanted to bring? I think driven people are people who would always maximize their resources and capacities to achieve their best, with what Nana Osei says. Because a driven person who doesn't know whether they are dying tomorrow or next 5 years is probably more likely to work harder because they don't know when they will die to achieve the most impact they want. So this is what pushed Albert Einstein. During the Black Plague, Albert Einstein discovered calculus. He did it in a time where it was so scary to die, etc., but pushed it because he knew that he doesn't know whether he will die today or tomorrow. That is a world where you get more self-development on our end, but more societal impact and societal development too at large. But average people are not people who are always going to be driven. That is to say that average people are people who struggle to believe that tomorrow is going to do better and rely on that uncertainty of the fact that we don't know what tomorrow will be, and if we survive the past, we can survive better to continuously maximize their time. We think these are the people who are more likely to give up in a world where they know exactly when they are going to die and leave themselves and give up on things, suffer a lot of mental health burdens and harms inherently at themselves because you feel like, what is the point of life? What is the point of all my struggles inherently as well too? I think this makes things symmetric, but analyze to you why in our world, average people, most people who go through struggle are probably going to give up on things. In their world, at best, whether or not you, like people who have longer lives are probably going to have a less sense of agency to achieve a lot of things, to actualize themselves and develop, etc. We think that's something that happens in their world ways. But the second conversation is on the conversation too about things like hyperfixation and how people have an incentive to strive better for themselves and also for the state inherently too as well. What is the analysis to that? I think our world is the one where people don't know when they are going to die. That is to say, you don't know whether today malaria kills you, tomorrow it's police violence, in 3 years' time it is a building that you didn't build very well. We think that a world where you don't know what kills you is a world where you create a society with structures to prevent all harms from killing everybody. It's like the veil of ignorance. If you're born into a world where you don't know whether you suffer from some form of oppression, suffer from some form of miscalculation or problems, you create a system where everybody equally tries to stop these issues. A world where you know what you want probably creates a world where people focus more on certain issues and less on certain issues as well. So not many people, for instance, are dying from malaria now, but because we all fear that we can die from malaria, we all do our best to fund pharmacies, to fund doctors, to push our states to take malaria very seriously and cut across board, as compared to a world where it's only some of the people in the poor areas who cannot really afford good medicine, only fighting to get malaria treated, but they cannot do that because they don't have the funds to support that inherently. I'll take Osei.
In your world, you have an illusion of tomorrow. Einstein was fortunate that he didn't die, but there were other amazing minds who kept procrastinating until tomorrow. But that tomorrow didn't come.
Yeah, I think in your world they would have procrastinated anyway, because whether or not they knew when, like, if you don't know whether tomorrow you will die, you should have more incentive to do more for your life. You have more incentive to choose your passions. You're not going to wait 30 years before you start pursuing what you love and what you want to do. That's why some people are doing law, even though it's a 6-year course, because they have the hope that in the next 6 years, they will reach where they need to be able to accomplish the law, create a better life for themselves, create a better society, and pursue their own self-actualization. And I think this is a problem with the gap side, because they don't realize how symmetric things are. In a world where I don't know when I'm going to die as a parent, I'm more likely to leave insurance for my children because tomorrow I can die, next 2 days I can die, next week I can die. That is why the insurance case and how you create systems for people left in society doesn't make as much sense as compared to our world. But I think our world is one too where you have less social stratification. That is to say, if their claim in their world is that governments are going to have access to the information on when you die, etc., that probably means that you have some of the problems that exist in status quo manifesting to be worse. Issues like how they are not hiring a lot of older people in society because they think older people will contribute less time to the workforce. Things of how insurance schemes give less beneficial schemes to certain people because they think they are predisposed to die, etc. You create a world where people with certain issues who could not control when they will die but are going to die in a certain amount of time have less capacity to things like insurance schemes, to things like good government work and pay, because the government wants to hire those who are going to live 80 years, 90 years and live longer and be able to benefit them in and of themselves. You don't get a better system on your world at all. I think our world has analyzed to you one thing. People will do better for themselves. People will self-actualize themselves. And people will strive for things. And even if they don't reach it, they are probably going to have chosen their passion anyways. And therefore, they would have been happy to some extent, even if they died before finishing the law. They would have appreciated jurisprudence like Solomon does now. So proud to propose. Oppose.
It is the hope that ropes. I'm going to do a couple meta conversations and explain to you why we win this debate. Every motion has questions that need answering for debates to happen. Those questions form the foundation of any extended impact. That means to weigh the debate, merely expanding on scope isn't sufficient. You need to do two things. One, a different mechanism that is more relevant and proximate. Two, an identification of an unfulfilled burden that completes the logical chain. I'm going to be showing you then, clash by clash, the work we have done. But I need to establish something from the beginning of this debate. The contention of this motion is that you know when and exactly how you die. The time in between when you are born and the 30 years at which you're here at the time you die is still very, very uncertain. You do not know how those things are going to play out. You just know the hour, the moment in which you're going to die. That will be relevant for a number of things I'm going to prove. First clash then within this debate, and that clash is the most important clash. If we win on it, we win this debate. The psychological impact. Within the motion is about knowledge, which is a primary conversation of the mind. What is our contribution then? Reducing existential anxiety. The second clash, and the next important clash, is social coordination, because our emotional responses and knowledge often translate into action towards one another. Our contributions are two: meaningful and directed life planning, and two, social stability through predictability. I'll be doing an even if analysis as well. Let's get then into the reduced anxiety of existence. But before I do that, I need to prove one thing. What is the decision-making calculus of human beings? Three things come together for an individual to take an action. One, the information they have. Two, the beliefs they have. And three, the capacity they have to take those actions. Within the conversation of death often falls within the conversations of belief. It is in this area that you often have spiritual conversations. What happens after death? Does my leaving this life have any meaning whatsoever? And all these are proofs of attempts in status quo for people to create certainty around your certainty. That does a number of things. Proves that people are very worried and it is in the back of their mind about the uncertainty of death. But two, are only able to live life in status quo because they've created some uncertainty around the uncertainty that exists that allows them to function in most instances. But let's put that aside and let me get into what I actually want to do. Two kinds of responses exist for individuals that are engaging in the conversation of death. One, I must take risk because tomorrow won't come, like Joel says. Or two, I won't take risk because it means nothing if I can't make much of it. Joel provides you the tipping point for this weighing so that analysis is not symmetric. One, driven people versus average people. How do average people think? Because I think I can agree with Joel that driven people, regardless, will try to make the most of their time, probably try to achieve the most. There's a lot of psychological analysis there. But how do average people think? I think the main bane of average people is that they are risk averse, and that is how they respond to life in most instances. Why are they risk averse? Because most average people exist in circumstances where they recognize their very limitations and their capacity to take actions in most instances. What that means is that they, in every action, they're trying not to waste the little resources they have in order to be able to survive in most instances. But the way that they make those decisions then now is that something that is very important in their decision making is death. Because certainty is what helps them decide whether this use of resource is a waste or not a waste of resources. Right. If death is a very important thing that is at the back of their mind, if we provide the certainty, we put them in a position where they're able to take better actions because it's part of their planning in their risk aversion in most instances. We fix that. Then let me directly engage OO, explain the extensions on the clashes. A couple of things. Okay, fine, let me take you closing.
Yeah, from closing, we say that the fact that you know a certainty doesn't prevent you. A thief knows that I can be caught, but they still go ahead and beg, like steal from me.
I don't understand why that contributes to the debate. If you come and prove it, do it. But I've explained the clashes that you should be important. A couple of things then. I think then that leads me to a number of things I need to engage on OO side. OO says that the biggest problem that exists on the larger scale is a conversation of hyperfixation. Because he says in the alternative, if we're uncertain of what kills people and when people are going to die, we're more likely to look for innovations that prevent harm for all persons. I think this is weird for a number of reasons. I think governments engage the average people, also engage in the risk aversion mechanism that exists in most instances. I think on our side, if governments also have the certainty of information that we have on our end, especially specifically that what kills people, then there's a sufficient allocation of resources into dealing with those harms particularly. Because on their world, malaria can kill people, I think we should send funding to malaria, and then COVID hits. What happens then in engaging conversations like COVID? I think sufficient amount of resources exist on most parts of the end. But I think there's a burden they need to accept on their side. There's a certainty of action. We can't avoid the death of these individuals in most instances, which means we always have to boil down the impact back to the individuals and how they engage with their own personal lives and meaning on that regard. That brings me to the conversation that Osei brings to you in today's debate: reduced anxiety of existence. You respond to me, so Joe, I want to take your PY. And now, 3 mechanisms for this. I think at the background of the mind of every individual, when they wake up this morning, is a conversation of what is possible for me to do and what is not possible for me to do. I think first mitigation here, I don't think people are stupid. I've already explained to you the risk aversion. But pain is part. Like, we don't take away pain in our world. If you take stupid decisions, you probably feel it. If you jump from a building and you fall, you feel the pain. You may not die, you feel the pain. People will then make decisions based on those things and mitigated that all on our side. And like the laws also exist, but that's not important. What I'm trying to point out to you here is that at the back of their mind, people fear random death in most instances. And so the way that they engage with their life and their emotional responses to a lot of things is the conversation of this is the moment in which I could die. But the second mechanism here is very simple. If then there's a certainty that exists for me, knowing when I'm not going to die and when I'm going to die, there's an acceptance of that death inherently, which means it does not become, my emotional responses to certain things become more certain and not uncertain because of that randomness of the death that exists in most instances. The proof is what Joel tries to flip. When somebody has terminal cancer and they are sure that they are going to die, their action is not that they get inherently depressed. It's that there's a whole process of psychology that they go through to accept that that death is inevitable and allows them to make more meaningful decisions and respond to people more clearly and express themselves more fully in most instances, in many places. We think the limitation of expression that comes with the background idea that you could randomly die at any time is particularly bad for a number of individuals. That is what exists. Even if he says people have some first reaction to it that makes them depressed, I think the same therapy mechanism that exists on those sides allows people to engage it more. Which brings me to my second mechanism. If there's a certainty of death that exists and every individual has to be born into this world, and probably on your 10th birthday we tell you that you're probably going to die when you're 50, we'll probably put in social mechanisms that allow people to accept that death in the first place and engage it in most instances in a way that is meaningful to their life. Since society has inherent incentive to make sure people want to engage the most meaning in their life, your parents and whatnot. But then the other thing is now the interaction with the grand scheme of things that I think is important. We think in status quo, we already have an example of things that happen when people try to create a certainty around death. We use mortality rates in government to determine that people are more likely to die at 60. That is why we probably put the pension age at 60. We think for government policies that exist around death like this, for example, if it's more certain for individuals, people can probably put pension policies that are individually tailored to them in a way that means that they're meaningfully able to have resources and use them and leave them for the next generation. That means we win this debate. Individual, society, I'm taking the trophy home.
I think within today's debate, the most important actor is the state for a number of reasons. Number one, the state actively incentivizes policies which make people's lives significantly better. But number two, at any point in time, these individuals live within the state. This directly influences the livelihoods of these individuals and the likelihood of these people getting a certain level of self-actualization. Therefore, this conversation which we have in today's debate has to analyze a number of things. Number one, Joel does a number of analysis, even if analysis, and then engaging what is brought by opening governments. He tells you that within today's debate, even if the government doesn't have this information, a number of harms which are being brought. But in the situations where the government has this information, there's a significantly greater amount of harm which is done for a number of reasons. Number one, governments oftentimes don't have a lot of money in of itself in status quo, and therefore oftentimes have to use that money in a way which is equitable for everyone within society. This is important because oftentimes within the conversation of social contract, they realize that they have to fulfill this social contract to a vast amount of people in status quo. Realize that social contract exists in their world, but the problem is that within the contract itself can only exist utilitarianly because the state doesn't have an infinite amount of money. The problem with status quo is that realization commercialization of their capacity for individuals to know when they die oftentimes means that, and the state also potentially knowing these things, oftentimes means that the state is most likely going to maximize its capacity to improve people's lives, and therefore going to most likely hurt minorities within status quo. Which minorities are most likely to be hurt within status quo? Oftentimes it is minorities in places where their deaths are probably not going to be capable of impacting the productivity of the state, or most likely capable of actively making the state a significantly better place. But number two, in status quo, private funders and how private funders fund change within society. The only reason why people actually care about a lot of things within society is that in the vast majority of instances, we don't know how people die. If people were coming to Ghana and they knew that most people weren't going to die from gender-based violence, but were probably going to die from poverty, there will be less people funding gender-based violence within society. There's less likelihood of societal change within society because people realize that there's less capacity to create meaningful change in your vessel. The problem within society is that it actively creates a system where there's a social stratification of what is most essential, in which people must get a change within their lives of itself. Because in their world, realizing that people can die a certain way and that certain deaths are most likely to be what is affecting most people in society, oftentimes means that in the vast majority of instances, we are creating a framework through which we judge how people's lives are valued and judge what is really important. Categorical imperative, all of us are valuable to a certain degree, all of us deserve to be treated equally. They are what creates a framework through which we are not treated equally. But second thing which is really important, conversations about rationality. Because I think that's another secondary information which is really important. And the conversation about adaptation to information. If you paid attention to Joel, you realize that Joel brought the mechanism through which today's debate is won. What does Joel tell within today's debate? It tells that rationality isn't just about having information, but it's about your capacity to constantly adapt to this information. Why is this really important within today's debate? Human beings, first and foremost, what does chaos look like? Chaos is only chaotic because we do not know the end goal of which is going to happen. The problem with this information is that human beings cope their life by the end of their life and not by the beginning or the middle part of their life. What that means is that for the vast majority of people, their irrationality is directly tied to the fact that they do not know the end goal of their life and the way they engage with it. The issue is that, number one, that is insanely important information to a lot of individuals because life is the most important thing for everybody on planet Earth. What that means is that them having this information actively overrides the ability to constantly adapt to new information in their life and constantly engage these things. But second thing is really important is that when you pay attention to the conversation within society, they still have to engage societal structures, which is why John starts argumentation by arguing to you the conceptualization of hope and how people continue to conceptualize hope. Which will tell you a number of things. Within society, societal structures still exist. The state will still exist. There will still be things to fight against. But the problem is that within society, the only reason why me and you, who are probably not Albert Einstein and not the most driven people, continue to fight is that we believe that there's a hope of a better life in the future, and we don't know whether we are going to die tomorrow, or we are going to die next week or next month. The only reason why the Nepalese youth will continue to fight consistently against their government is because they believe that there's a future they can live in, and there's a future where their life is impactful. They therefore believe that there's an incentive for them to fight for this because they can create a better future, a future they do not know, a future where they might not necessarily die on the streets of the land, but might die of old age. That's significantly more impactful because it affects the way individuals engage with themselves, number one, and seek to attain self-actualization. But number two, it affects the functions of the state and the capacity to make people's lives significantly better in the future. If not at all, we are still winning today's debate on a significant margin in your result before CG.
The reason why the Nepalese youth waited until 2025 to fight is because they think they will live long. If they knew they would die last year, they would have fought 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It would have happened earlier. Your speed would be more now.
So I don't know, like at least we are showing mechanisms for why they are more likely to engage it this way. Because in our world, we are showing you realistically that these people realizing that there is no future that they can actually perceive, which they can, there's no future they can actually perceive, means that they are more likely to try and hold the future within their hands, right? But the conversation about the societal structure is really important because we want to understand how their world engages people in societal structures. We're looking at women within places where they are probably living within misogynistic societies, etc., and how they engage with societal structures in of itself. Because the problem is that in status quo, you continue living with capitalistic structures. You probably still continue living within the frameworks which society has already built. The only reason why our society is constantly as productive as it is in status quo is due to the fact that at any point in time, people don't realize that there's a potential that they are going to die 2 years from now. What does this look like? The only reason why Nana Osei is taking a 6-year course in law is because he doesn't know whether he's going to die at the end of that course, God forbid. What does that mean in today's debate? It means that at any point in time, he's actively working and he's actually putting in, at least to a certain degree, his best. The problem is all of us have an incentive to climb the capitalistic ladder. All of us have an incentive to try and at least be the CEO or to get more money for ourselves. This incentive only exists because we don't know whether we'll have to pay for our pension at age 60. We don't know whether we actually have to be capable of paying our children's school fees. We don't know what unforeseeable things will happen to us in society. we do realize yet again, because we bite all the bullets, there's probably symmetry, right? That the point is there's probably going to be a world where individuals will still be capable of going through pain. The problem is that these people are more likely to put themselves in these positions of pain just by the mere fact that they believe that there's a future which is predetermined. We think that's fundamentally wrong. The simple explanation of this, after all of this, is that Joe is fundamentally win on the major clashes they bring up about their psychological needs, etc., and the societal needs. And then we further impact this by proving to you conclusively that the societal needs in of itself and our ability to change society is how we create a better environment and create a better world for everyone to exist in. But finally, and most importantly, after all of this, I think I can reasonably say that the rationality of individuals can be weighed by a concept as heavy as death, something which takes the most valuable thing away from individuals. We think that this is really important for a number of reasons. I mean that at any point in time, people live with a reasonable amount of mental duress. Knowing when you die is something which is significantly heavy on the psyche of an average individual, because the average individual still has to realize that they might not be capable of getting everything they would have wanted, and this is fundamentally fixed for them. The problem in status quo is that people have dreams. We prefer a world where people continue to chase these dreams without being limited by a 30-year framework where they can consistently create a more productive environment, where they can consistently fight for a better world, where they can consistently try and create change. The only side with mechanisms prove that is a world where people consistently fear death and consistently realize that the world, that they can actually change the world. No better day to vote for all than today.
Or you can move back so that you can talk better. It's just equitable, Sha. It's fine. In a dishouse refers motion, you're supposed to do world building. I think OG does reasonable world building. The issue is they leave out some gaps which OO exploits, and CO, for the love of God, will love to exploit. I'm going to cover these gaps on what the likely structuring of society is going to look like. I think even though death is painful, it oftentimes is not the most dangerous or worst thing that can happen to you. I think some of the most worst things that can happen to you when you are alive. This looks like being in a vegetative state. This looks like being a paraplegic, being unable to engage with all the other things you want to engage in society. Why is this particularly important? Because it means that their claim that society is not going to be structured to protect individuals from other forms of harm is non-existent. We most likely will still have road laws, because even though you are destined to die from something else other than a car accident, you might become incapacitated because of a car accident, and you would want your government to protect you from that. That means their whole case on that crap does not work out. But secondly, I think protection is likely going to exist for people because people do not want to spend their last days in the worst form possible. Even though I might die at the end of the year, I don't want to spend my last 32 days living without a penis because I probably want to fuck a lot. What this means is I most likely will not engage in dangerous activities that most likely could lead to the loss of my penis. What this means then is that there would be laws, there would be protection, there is still going to be like reasonable structuring of society. On an individual level, it means even I, who knows I'll die at the end of the year, would still be careful because I don't want dangerous things happening to me that will be unpleasant. These guys do not have a case. They do not have a place in this debate. I'll be very remiss if they are anything other than out of this debate. But secondly, what do we think? Sit down. What do we think is most likely going to happen in the structuring of society? And why do we think people who are soon to die are most likely going to be the less oppressed people? Because their second claim is minorities. I don't think that's a reasonable or sensible case on any degree. Because, note panel, when individuals know that they have a limited amount of time, what that does is that it heightens urgency. What that means then is that you most likely feel more antsy to do things because you know that if you don't do things at a particular point in time, it's going to be harmful to you. Why is this relevant in a way in which these guys do not talk about? Because society is going to be structured around these ways. What this means is that employers most likely would want to employ a worker that is very itchy to achieve certain platinum goals and certain things that are very pivotal to their career because they know they have a short period of time. Because if I know I have a short period of time, I most likely would do much greater things because I want to leave a legacy, which is something that is endemic for everybody since we are all self-motivated and self-driven. What this means then is that they most likely are not going to be oppressed and pushed out of structures. People will most likely embrace people who are closer to death because they know that these people are most likely going to pursue the most amount of efficiency, pursue the most amount of success, and pursue the most amount of levels of getting things to happen. On our world, those people most likely are going to be the best protected. Think about how we treat a lot of terminally ill individuals who are still functional. We most likely still want to keep them because we know that they will do things better since they know their time is short. Why do we think that our extension then is going to win this debate in that regard? Panel, this is purely novel and purely unique. People already want to know this information. How do we know this to be true? Two structural reasons. One, the reason why there's a heightened amount of divination and spirituality is because of the uncertainty that exists in many of these spaces. I'm wearing freaking howlights right now because my girlfriend in South Africa thinks she has to protect me with her pagan potions so nothing happens to me in that regard. We think what this means is that the heightened amount of divination, shut up and sit down, please. The heightened amount of divination and spirituality is something that means that individuals already want to know and avert death in that particular nature. But secondly, there is a continuous investment and pursuit of preventative medicine and diagnosis. People go for checkup constantly because they want to be sure that they are not dying tomorrow. People go for a lot of things in this particular regard. Why is this particularly relevant? What this means is that uniquely from side CG, you know that people are not scared of that information. They seek that information. Why is it better on our side then? Because it means that they most likely are not going to resort to the tools of status quo in seeking that information. We think the tools of status quo are the things that I've listed out to you, but we think that they are equally quite exploitative, equally quite uncertain, and they put you in a position where you hang your hat on things that they talk about. Hope. The thing about hope is that hope is very ruthless. I was hopeful that one day I'll probably be living in the Bahamas at the age of 25. Newsflash, I'm freaking 25. I'm still living in freaking Accra, Ghana. What this means then is that there is an uncertainty on their end that you are supposed to operationalize your life upon. On our end, that certainty leads you to pursue things and take life by the balls in that regard. But secondly, I think people are going to live their lives without running away from the ghoul of death, because they know when it's going to come and they know how they are going to contend with it. We think that that is good. Why do we think that this is primarily unique in the debate and why we win this debate? Again, something you don't get from anyone. And this is the third level of extension that definitively makes Darren the first novice AO champion you've ever had. What do we think this looks like? I think that when there is a form in which society would shape off us, there are oftentimes things that will signal it. Note, this is a prefers a world debate. Archimedes, you read the manual. The manual says, in a prefers a world debate, since the start of time, things will be structured like this. Why do we think that the manner in which communities would form would be different and would be better? Because we think that stronger communities, I unfortunately can't take you, stronger communities are going to be formed off of the back of knowledge of the time when you lose. What this means then is that individuals who have similar lines or similar paths to which they are going to die can unionize and create like protective mechanisms for themselves to insulate themselves from pain. Note, I'm not saying they are insulating themselves from death. I'm saying they are insulating themselves from pain. What this means is that if you know that you're going to die from suicide, it means that you most likely are going to talk to other people who most likely are going to die from suicide, and they tell you their plans of how they will prepare their family to know that this is not bad. They prepare their society to know that this is okay. They do not say this. They only flag that you prepare your family. I give you tangible proof as to why you most likely are going to do that. What again is the grounded proof that this is most likely going to happen? Because we see this going on in status quo. Cancer patients constantly meet together, talk about how they will handle issues because they know that their time is limited. Community building is stronger for them because they know that their time is limited. On our side, you get that. On their side, you do not know. I still don't know how I'm going to die, so I don't know if I'm going to talk to Umu or talk to Daniel. What that means then is that I can't tap into their knowledge of how to make life better within this period of time. What this means then is that on our side, people are much more reasonable and better planned. This is something OG says. I'm a very fair guy. I'm so fair, God damn it. I think the reason why we take it over them is because in the absence of a structural reason that grounds it, you cannot credit them. They surmise. I prove. Very, very proud to win AO 2025.
Foundation. It means that then I was derivative, so I've lost the round. So I want you to listen to the analysis so that I can see the difference, right? And this is very important. But before I go on, let me take out closing. Closing says that knowing information is important, because everybody wants to know the information, and because of that, it's proof that it's good that they know. The fact that you are curious to know that your girlfriend is cheating on you doesn't mean you want to know that information won't harm you, or that information has a deleterious effect on you. You get it? So that's a very terrible extension, which is like really the bulk of the extension. So that takes them out, right? Now the problem with opening. Within openings, a lot of openings benefits are very symmetric in this debate. And it's good because these guys kept pointing that out. And that's why both of them fall in the same pit. Both of the information they give us is symmetric. So for instance, if I come and give you information, it depends on who you are. You take the information differently, right? And because of that, it's very difficult for us to really attach like who wins on those particular clashes. And that's the problem with the opening sides. But then the first thing, our first extension in this debate is about how we think this reduces your quality of life. And this is very important. The idea that you know that you are going to die doesn't mean that you will not get harmed within the time period that you are going to die. Why is this important? Why are people more likely to make risky decisions? And they want us to provide a make. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want you to be like, oh, I didn't contribute to that chat. I just said that it's benefits and harms. I'm contributing to that chat. Especially what he said. People are more likely to make risky decisions for several reasons. Number one, and that's the example of the thief. A thief knows that there's a police. I might be caught if I'm going to steal. But then they still go ahead to go and like rob people. The reason why, even though they know that there's a harm at the end of the day, is because they weigh it. So there is a weighing mechanism that exists for people to make those particular choices. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there are far more like important pressures on people to make those kind of risky choices. For instance, you know that you have 5 years to live, so you have to provide for your family, because you don't live just for yourself. You live for your children, you live for your wife, you live for your friends. All that means is that you already have you already have a reason to more likely make a riskier choice, but that choice is compounded by the idea that there are people you need to provide for within the short term, right? It means that there's a higher likelihood that you will make a riskier decision which harms you at the end of the day. Why is that important? It's important because when you get harmed in the process of doing riskier things, like going, like probably burglaring people, or probably like doing riskier jobs, carrying cement and all those things, the harms live with you until the 5 years you're about to die. It means the quality of your life is largely diminished in the world in which you do this. And this is why we think knowing your death and how, like when that's about to happen is more likely to be harmful to you. In terms of psychology and whatever frame they call it, psychology on the individual, how it harms the individual, we give the most important contribution to that chart. But then the second thing, we think it's most likely going to lead to discrimination. We are going to prosper. In society, the world is starting all over again. So everybody knows that they are going to die at a certain point in time, which is the year they're going to die. We think that means that society recreates itself in such a way that we get a new group of people who are now minorities. We think what that means is that that new group are likely going to face levels of microaggressions which largely affect their psyche and how they exist within society. For instance, people who have terminal illnesses, people who have cancer, people who have HIV, the way in which society reacts to them is to shun them, right? So you can say that you can unionize and then think about the pain. Let's come together. Let's huddle. Like we are sad and all those things. You can huddle. That's good. But I still have a certain stereotype I have against you. So even if it's not in the most drastic form, as opening says, right? The most drastic form of active discrimination, of denying you something. What happens is that there are microaggressions that has things to do with being able to interact with groups of people. And those things determine your quality of life within that short period of time. Within your quality of life is the most important thing for us to discuss in the debate. To a point where society recreates in a world in which it makes you a new minority, where there are microaggressions which keep you away from social spaces. We think this is harmful to your life and the quality of your life. We think this is important. But then let's go on to the actual discrimination. And this is how we are different. And panel, note, opening says that banks will deny you credit, right? Why do we make a better analysis as to how banks deny you credit is important? Because society needs an aggregation of businesses to thrive. Banks, and in their inherently, always want to prioritize their gains at the end of the day. The problem is that they look at things like creditworthiness and who can pay me back and all those things. But people don't just take money from banks to buy a Lamborghini. They take money from banks to build businesses. The fact that you die doesn't mean a business ceases to exist. You get it? There are people who inherit businesses, that people continue to run them and all those things. All those things have trickled down economic effects, such as creating jobs for people and making sure the quality of life of people is improved. In a world in which banks know that you will die in 5 years, they will not even risk to give you the credits because, as everybody has said, they are already credits averse in the first place. It means that you take away a large ability for society to create businesses for people who live in the short term, right? Even though those businesses will continue to exist. Check your notes. They only said banks will deny you credit. You cannot take that argument. I've done the analytical extension as you want me to do. So I think that's beautiful. Yeah, opening.
If people steal because they are hungry, the government should just feed them. The pressure doesn't push them to evil.
Yeah.
And being a minority, being a utility is not a bad thing.
Yes. So we can say the government should just do something. I wish the government would give me a scholarship to Cambridge, but they are not doing it. Saying that doesn't mean it materializes. This is not a policy debate. This is a value debate. So you can't make those kind of ridiculous claims from your side. But then the next thing, we think on your side, you're more likely to have a self-fulfilling prophecy that's about to happen. This guy, panel, this is important. This guy says, framing. Don't talk about this because we know. You can't come and tell us what to talk about and what not to talk about. We think that what people are more likely going to try to either prevent their death or do things that try to get them to escape that. Why do we think that so? Because humanity has an immortality complex, right? How many times have people tried to lengthen their lives? How many times have people tried to escape their fate? Humanity has an immortality complex. You get to respond. Humanity has an immortality complex, and because of this, they are more likely going to try to escape these things. That is the mech for why people will try to escape these things. Why do we think that's impactful and harmful? Because those actions lead to the death, like the harm of more people in your ability to try to do these things. That's why Victor Frankenstein will try to create a monster and end up ruining the lives of so many people. Proud to win this debate from Syria. So the last extension, if I'm giving. Oh, your turn.
I begin in 3, 2, 1. Hope is nasty. Hope is an illusion. Hope is fake. And hope is the grounds on which people get manipulated and exploited. We do not want hope. Because I think that's the extent to which OO's case then relies on. The fact that people will thrive on hope. Let's take OO out of today's debate. The first thing is that people would then not adapt to societal structures. First reason, utility. I think people, regardless of anything that happens in society, still want a chance for utility. What this looks like is that you do not want to go to prison, not because you really fear prison. It's because you think that prison will de-utilize you, the person sitting there. So you wouldn't like to go to prison because it compounds or hinders your own freedom and your own utility in that regard. I think because people, in one way or the other, still want to pursue utility, they still wouldn't want to actually challenge societal structures that exist in society in that regard. But the second thing is that they say that, well, to actually change society depends on hope. Two reasons to that. First of all, we think that people are still motivated by deadlines. What this looks like is that because the deadline is actually closing up to you, you still will want to actually act for change. But the difference is that in our world, you get change far faster because now you are aware of your deadline. But the second reason is that people literally will still act for change because they have people they live for. I live for my mom, I live for my wife, my girlfriend, etc. I will still want to fight the system just because we want to. I think Martin Luther King did that. There are so many people that didn't want to change the system for themselves, but for so many people that existed in society. Then again, their next case, well, people will hyperfixate on some specific things that is not important and like different issues, etc. Two reasons. One, pain. The second thing is emotions. The first thing of pain. I think pain exists. You still will feel pain in society. That pain that you are going to feel is still going to help you want to make a change in society. I don't think that the fact that you actually know the date of death is actually taking pain from the existence in society in that regard, right? I think pain still exists. Pain is still going to propel you in that regard. It means that the only thing they get is that they try to prove that the only thing that makes people want to chase dreams, the only thing that makes people want to chase legacies is the thought of death. I don't think that's true in that regard. There are so many reasons why Albert Einstein actually found the Aboagye. It was even coincidence. There are so many reasons. It's not exclusive to only death that we actually get sort of societal changes in that regard. Your POI.
We go through pain every day. We get used to it. we adapt, we get a second chance. We only have one life and die once. No adaptation, no second chance. Not knowing when we lose that
You know why this is even flawed? It's like saying I got a heartbreak 3 times, so I'm used to the heartbreak on the 4th time. It doesn't make sense. The fact that I go through pain constantly doesn't mean it takes pain away. Pain is still there. You still will be conscious of the things you do. The next thing they say then is on the stratification it creates. And the extent that thing goes, the what grounds it is on the employment and the credit loans and blah, blah, blah. The first reason why employment still exists regardless is because unlike systems in Ghana where people probably want to fire you, etc., there are systems outside that also want you, like are afraid for things like pension funds, etc. So they actually will hire you because of short spans, meaning that in as much as they are still hiring people that have short lifespans, they are still hiring people that still have long lifespans because the government sector also wants people that live. I think it's something that is actually balanced and symmetric. People still get a hiring job. But the second thing is that this is literally just a policy problem. They can literally change it. It's not something that cannot be changed with the policies that exist. It's not something that is exclusive to just the dates of death in that regard. Yes, your PY then.
Yeah, so like it's not just by saying that they can change it by policy. We give people make as to why they are more likely not going to do this.
And I think I wasn't actually tackling you. I'm now coming to your cases. Thank you very much. The first case they say reduces life quality. First thing, the first assumption they make is that, the first thing that grounds them is the example of the thief, blah, blah, blah. First, I've never seen a thief going thinking that I'm not going to get money. The reason why they actually go into these things is because they think that their end goal is going to bring them utility. With death, you literally have no utility at the end, meaning that there's really no difference in that regard. But the second reason is that there is still like a possibility of being caught. The fact that there is a possibility of being caught is the reason why they still go. On our side, there's literally no possibility. You literally know you are going to die. So why would you, what's the difference? And I think that's what makes them shift into that sort of, immortality complex, which I think, for instance, is trying to just break the motion. It's not something you can really credit in that regard. The second case then is on the discrimination. Even though it's quite derivative, it has few mechanisms. The first example they gave is on how people actually do not sympathize with HIV/AIDS. They actually cast them away. First and foremost, I think HIV is the reason why we hate it is because we can easily contract it. That is the major reason. The major reason why we actually sympathize with people like the cancer patient is because there are so many other feelings and emotions that exist. Things like empathy, things like sympathy, things like kindness, etc. That's why I have things like Make-A-Wish Foundation that is actually for these cancer patients, etc. There are so many reasons why these people are still going to exist in that regard. They are still not going to be discriminated in that regard. But the next thing is that this thing is literally symmetric. In your you still get a form of discrimination. It's just that it's not just based on that. It's based on so many things that exist, like poverty, like etc. Those things. But the second thing then they say is that the bank would cause the credit, blah blah blah. First and foremost, again, this is a policy problem. I don't think this cannot be changed because of things like this. But the second thing is that there's literally unionization that Prosper has proven to an extent that people that are actually short-term have a short-term to live are actually going to unionize to actually insulate themselves from the pain of society in that regard. I don't think that you can even buy their case to the highest extent. The next thing then is that because there's a need to actually please people in society in that the government actually has a need to actually make a whole lot of people very, very happy in society because they want to stay in power, etc. So they have every reason to actually provide that capacity to these people that are actually suffering in that regard, because these people are not even minorities. There probably is 1 billion people that are having short-term things in that regard. I don't think that's a case that can actually run in today's debate. What you get from Prosper and why that extension is something that is very important, because it tells you very well that these are things that people already want to know. Things like divination, things like pursuance of bad things. And that's the problem, because these things actually form a form of exploitative and manipulative grounds on these people. That's something that we are trying to prevent in that regard. But the next thing is that we try to unionize these people and actually know these things so that they can actually insulate themselves and actually have a family in that regard. Proud to propose.
Okay, panel. Motion before us is this house prefers a world where we know how and when we die. As we've done throughout this tournament, we're about to adjudicate the debates. Show you why side closing opposition ranks first, opening opposition ranks second. These guys are third, and as for Prosper, fourth, solidly fourth in this debate. So let's start with the opening sides of the debate. Panel, what was the problem with the opening sides of the debate? And I'm about to tell you something which may sound very controversial, but you have to do it. You can't credit either opening side with most of the things that they said. This is the reason why. A lot of the information that both sides brought, you realize that there was a bit of a fight as to who owns what. I own innovation. I own the fact that people are likely going to be motivated or not motivated. You realize that both sides were fighting about it. The reason why both sides were fighting about it it's not just because of debate. That's a very, very dumb response. The reason why both sides were fighting about it is what Bannerman tells you is how individuals process information is very different. He knew he was not going to win today's final against him, but he still came. Bannerman will probably think that he can win. He will not win, but might still appear here today. We all assimilate information differently. So somebody may know he's about to die and may be motivated to do more within that short period. Somebody may also know he's about to die and may not be motivated to do more. And that's been the problem with a lot of the things that they run. And that rebuttal runs throughout. If I take my time to go through everything they said, it will just waste your time. And that's what I'm saying is controversial, because it means you can't credit them with most of the things that they said because it exists in both worlds. That's the problem. So the only things I'm going to address from opening sides are the things which are unique, which don't exist in both worlds. Prime Minister. Well, he tells us about the fact that death is known, is certain, and cannot be changed. Bannerman tells you that the fact that your death is certain and cannot be changed does not mean that people will not still try to avert that death. Panel, this is very important. The motion actually says that you can't, or well, at least the word that they created says you can't change it, and that's fine. He's not saying they'll be successful. He's saying that they are still going to attempt to do that. So when opening sides in response to that say that he's breaking the motion, it doesn't make sense. The fact that I know I'm going to die doesn't mean that I'm not still going to try to avert that prophecy. What is the approximate case that we have? We have situations in real life where people who believe in prophecies, I don't, but people who believe in prophecies get prophecies and still try to avert it. So what that shows you is that when human beings even get information that they are told is certain, when it's something that is unfavorable to them, they still try to change it. Why is that important? It's important because it reduces their quality of life. That's why Bannerman's extension on quality of life becomes very important, because they are likely to make decisions that's going to reduce their quality of life within that period from the time where they live and the time that they're going to die. 2, he tells you about the fact that opening also tells you that people will not obsess over the possibility of our death. It's in their death. It's in our world that people obsess over death. No, in their world, people will still obsess over death because now they obsess about the certainty of death. Because now they know they are going to die, the date and the time they are going to die. So they'll be obsessing over that. That, oh my God, on 20th August 2026, I'm going to die. They're still going to obsess over it. So this idea that is only in our world that people obsess over death, the obsession is different. In our world, people are obsessing about when they are going to die. In your world, people are obsessing about the certainty of death. It still exists anyway. Then he says people will overwork, underlive, and hoard resources. These things will still happen even in their world. Listen, I'm coming. If I know I'm going to die soon, I might overwork so that within that period of time before I die, I maximize my quality of life. I might underlive because I might also feel like, well, it's at the end of the day, it's futile. I'm going to die within the next 6 months. I might still hoard resources because I have other people that I also live for. So I might hoard the resources for them. So all these things, they go for, in fact, I've changed my mind. They are fought in this debate. They are not thinking about it. Then they talk about interpersonal relationships, how it affects interpersonal relationships. And that people will make better choices when they know people are about to die. Bannerman tells you that we don't care. We want you, human freedom is very important. You have the right to fuck up your relationships. It's only in our world that you're actually able to freely express that right. What happens in their world is that there's some pressure on you knowing that the person is going to die, and that artificially changes how you behave towards that person. Pano, this is actually very, very important. I know you're about to die. The reason why I'm now being nice towards you is only because I know you are going to die. It means that I have no actual freedom in determining how I treat you, right? And so that's a problem, and that's why even they are fault. But yes, let me take you. No, I'm taking them. I'm taking open here.
See, the problem with this case is all you're doing with is symmetricizing without pointing to the tipping point. Remember that numbers by the time. It doesn't have an extension.
So Bannerman has already done that. You see, the debate ended 7 minutes ago when Bannerman finished speaking, because this guy didn't even say anything. He has already done that. But since you want me to educate you again, I'm going to go through it. But anyway, I'm coming. Now to close, I'm coming. Let me deal with you first, then you can ask a good POI. No. So they come to us and then they make a very good point. They try to touch on the quality of life argument by saying that, listen, between the period where you would die and the period you are living, that period is very important, and they are right about that. But then after that, they go and fall into the same trap. What are some of the things Prosper tells us? He tells us that there is reduced anxiety over death, which is something that these guys already said. And he tries to sneakily take it. Panel, don't credit him for that because these guys actually already said it. He doesn't add any new mech to it, but this our response to that. As we already said, it exists in both worlds. People will still obsess about the death that they know. Then he brings this idea about innovation because resources will not be put into dealing with things that are not important. The reason why that doesn't make sense, okay, because he's saying that government is not going to focus their resources on certain important things because maybe they know that a lot of people are not dying from it. So let's say malaria. Now government knows that a lot of people are not dying from malaria, so they will not put in more resources. Yes, that's good. They shouldn't put in those more resources at the end of the day. We don't care about that because if it was important, more people will be dying from it. But the thing is, if the thing is also intrinsically bad, the mere fact that few people are dying about it, the government will still put in the resources to deal with those things. So that thing doesn't come here or there. Now, coming to opening, why we are very distinct and why they are second. Yes, Prosper. Prosper complains. Yes. Okay.
The reason why I
Panel, I understand his anxiety. Yeah. Now, why these guys come second? Right? Why these guys come? They only come second because of how the motions actually weighted us up. That's the truth, and that's why they are second. It's not really because they did anything really extraordinary in these debates. What did they talk about actually? Okay, so they talk about the fact that uncertainty is what creates optimism. Bannerman shows you that it goes both ways. Certainty can also create optimism. I've already dealt with that. I don't want to go into much. Then they talk about the driven person and the average person as a distinction. That driven people may do more, average people may do less. No, it's about people who believe in fate of their success and people who don't believe in the fate of their success. Listen, if I know when I'm going to die, I'm likely to do something not because I'm driven, but I'm likely to do because I think it's also fated for me to succeed. So the distinction is not really between average people and actually motivated people. It's actually about people who believe in faith and people who don't. Bannerman gives you that. Then DLO tells you that, the psychological, is that panel, unfortunately, as you can see, this debate, they said a lot of things I had to engage. That's why I couldn't go through what Bannerman said, but it's very clear that closing opposition wins this debate. Thank you very much.